move on, shall we? And we're going to talk about this cruise liner tragedy, which is a topic we've been discussing now for a couple of days. The captain now is claiming that he had intended to stay with the ship. This is according to leaked interrogation transcripts leaked by an Italian newspaper. So CNN is not independently confirming those words at this point. The captain claims, though, and I have to say this borders on the absolutely insanely ridiculous, that somehow he slipped and fell into a lifeboat, and that's why he was off the ship. He wasn't trying to abandon the ship. He also mentioned that he gave away his life jacket to a passenger. I mean, it's insane. Anyway, there is some evidence, though, about what exactly did happen on board that ocean liner on Friday night, because this is transcript of these calls back and forth from the ship to the port authority. And so, as you can see from some of this timeline, at 10:06, police on land called the ship to make the ship aware of the problems. What had happened was a woman on land had got a phone call from the ship from her son. And so it was the police on land who reached out to the ship at 10:06. Then the Concordia officers tell the Coast Guard, well, it's only a power outage. It's no big deal, essentially. By 10:26 p.m., the captain calls the Coast Guard and says there's an open hole in the ship. And they also at 10:48 say there's an evacuation under evaluation. At 10:58, nearly 1 hour after police were first making the ship aware of the problems, the evacuation process finally begins. Let's get right to our guest on this. Is Jack Hickey. He's a maritime attorney. We've got our panel back again. Mr. Hickey, thanks for being with us. It's nice to see you again. We appreciated your help yesterday, and I have more questions for you today. So let's start with the captain first, because there's so much to talk about. Oh, thank you. From the get-go, I think the word incompetent is sort of one everybody's been using. But now it looks like there's an hour, the hour before they called for the evacuation, he's actually on the phone with the cruise line company. From a legal perspective, how does this affect how this case could go?
Well, you know, from a legal perspective, I mean, there's many points of negligence here. There's like so many things he did wrong from the navigational standpoint, number one, to the delays in calling for Mayday, to the, you know, as is coming out now, he's calling the company and having a conversation with the company apparently before damage assessment. The very first thing that a captain on board a ship should do is take leadership and do damage assessment to see what are the facts. And, you know, this captain, he was all about relying on other people for what the facts were, relying on, and it's just incredible, this new timeline that you pointed out, that people on shore are now calling the ship to find out, you know, to tell them what's going on or that there is a problem before the captain really has done his damage assessment. I mean, this is going to go this is going to affect all the legal proceedings, but it's pretty clear that the cruise line is going to be responsible because they are responsible for the negligent actions of the captain. I'm sorry?
What degree? Because when you look at, and I think this is there was an article that I read where you were quoted that talked about the Costa contract. And I remember the very few times I've taken cruises, you sign these contracts about the cruise. And this one says that this contract says the line will pay no more in cases of death, personal injury, and property loss than $71,000 per passenger. It allows for no recovery of mental anguish, no recovery for psychological damages, and it bars class action suits. That sounds very clear. Does negligence change what looks like an ironclad contract that says, listen, people, we don't care what happens, you cannot get anything out of the company?
That is the cruise passenger contract, which is, you know, we printed one out. I mean, it's 8 pages of very fine, small print, and it's all legal gobbledygook. You put your finger on what's called the Athens Convention, which if the cruise does not touch a U.S. port, the Athens Convention would apply and impose that limitation on damages, which is just absolutely horrendous. But the Athens Convention has an exception. One of the exceptions is intentional conduct. And what we have here is intentional conduct by the captain. He intentionally navigated that ship way too close to shore. He intentionally abandoned ship before he should have. All these are intentional acts. And I know that, I don't know if you're referring to the New York Times, but the New York Times was making a point that, well, you know, what if the cruise line says, well, you know, too bad, so sad, it's the intentional act of a captain, but we did not authorize him to do any of these things. Well, you know, the fact is, and I went online yesterday looking at that after that question was raised, because it's almost absurd, you know, to think, oh, well, we want to distance ourselves from the captain, and on the Costa cruise,
which they've been doing very aggressively.
Right, which they have been doing very aggressively, you know, for obvious reasons, I guess. And if you go on their website, though, under a certain section, you can see the hierarchy on board the ship or in the company. And I have it here, and I printed this out, and you can see the chairman and CEO at the top, and under that is the president, and right under that is the captain of the ship. So the captain of the ship is right under the president of the company in terms of the hierarchy with regard to the ship. The captain is the master of everything that takes place in regard to that ship, and he should be responsible. But, you know, this is, you know, getting back to the negligence, and people do have rights and remedies under the ticket contract. It's just that because this is a foreign-based cruise line, and because this particular cruise did not touch a U.S. port, there are those limitations. And getting back, you know, the Athens Convention initially does apply, but I say the exception comes into play here.
I have a feeling this is a conversation that you and I will be having on television for a long time over the next couple of months, as this is definitely going to be a case, and many cases probably that go to court. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate your time again this morning. I want to turn now to the big debate that's happening tonight. It is the final one.